Welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast. I'm Janey Lee Grace. This is for you if you've quit the booze or you'd like to, or maybe you're just sober curious. I'll bring you tips and motivation without any judgment, and there'll be inspiration from experts, quit-lit authors, and sober heroes. Hi and welcome to the podcast. Wow, what a week it's been. I've actually been practicing what I preach for once, and I've had some self-care. I took myself off to inner guidance retreat for a few days in Suffolk, and it was just great actually to get a different perspective, really chill out, do a bit of yoga and meditation. I'm lucky, aren't I? Eat amazing vegan food, and of course soak up some of Jo DeRosa's energy. She was our guest last week on the podcast, and just in case I haven't made it clear, that's because Jo DeRosa, who was our guest last week, runs the Quantum Sobriety 5-day retreats at the same beautiful venue. And then they also have these mini retreats which anyone can attend, and it's just great, just a few days just to kind of step out of your real life, as it were, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that. I had an amazing gong bath with Dom DeRosa one night, and it's always a really different experience each time to have a gong bath. If you've never experienced one before, then put that on your self-care bucket list. And it was also the weirdest weather. I mean, even for the UK, as you know, in February and early March here in the UK, we had some incredible hot sunny days, and even kind of beach weather, and then of course the cold came back, which we were expecting. But then this week, while I was on retreat, there was a torrential sleet and hailstorm, and then it settled like snow across the fields. So there's these white fields. It was just bizarre. And they have an actual labyrinth in the garden. It's amazing. And I walked the labyrinth one day, sort of crunching on the snow with the sun shining on me. It was absolutely beautiful. Anyway, if you haven't heard Jo DeRosa's story yet, have a listen to that podcast. It's really powerful work that she's doing with quantum sobriety and with inner guidance. And I met a woman on the mini retreat who had done that 5-day rehab retreat a couple of years ago, and she found it just absolutely transformative. So that's an amazing testimonial for Jo. So on to this week's guest. I wanted to focus this whole first season of the podcast around self-care and finding out who you really are, because I really do think when people start to address their drinking, so often they end up doing a complete overhaul, really, of their life. Once you kind of stop numbing yourself and start to see the holistic picture, it can be a time when we look to exercise, perhaps for the first time, or a different form of exercise, to healthy eating. People start thinking about nutrition. Often people start to question their career, the work they do, their sense of purpose. They might even realise that it's time for a change of career, or time to start a business, or time to write the book they've always wanted to write. Whatever it is, I do believe that with sobriety comes a new kind of confidence. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that I'm not trying to get Pollyanna on everyone here. I'm not trying to say that means that nothing bad ever happens. Shit still happens, but you are much better equipped to deal with it. I really believe that. So my guest today is Kitty Waters, and she encourages people to do their dharma. That's her phrase. We'll talk about that in the interview. And create the life of their dreams. And she loves to inspire people, as I do, to look inside and discover their soul's calling. So what is it you are really here to do? And if that sounds really daft and woo-woo, maybe it does now, but perhaps it won't at some point in the future. Kitty is the co-creator of the Network for Transformational Leaders, and she'll tell you on the interview, but again, she's someone who's had her own journey. Her life has gone full circle after having a nervous breakdown in her 20s, suffering from depression, drug and alcohol abuse. But she has a 20-year background now in business, having built departments and companies from scratch. And she was a shareholder in a James Caan recruitment firm, as in Dragon's Den, one of his businesses. Kitty also now has her own podcast, Kitty Talks, and I've been a guest on there. So that was really nice to be able to reciprocate. So enjoy the podcast. It's Kitty Waters. So I'm absolutely thrilled that my guest is Kitty Waters, transformational teacher and entrepreneur. And I was delighted to be able to be a guest on Kitty's podcast. So it seemed absolutely fair that she comes and talks to us, because she does some fascinating work. She's a co-creator of the Network for Transformational Leaders. Kitty, welcome to the podcast. And I'm really interested in your story. Before we talk about the work that you do, tell us a bit about your own story and how you came to be doing the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, thank you, Janey. It was so lovely to be with you and your audience, first of all. I'm excited about the conversation we're about to have. My story, my life pretty much fell apart. But when I put it back together, I became a lot stronger. My family history is I have a big history of depression in the female side of my family. It runs down generations. We've got bipolar, we've got suicides, we've got chronic depression, and I was no stranger to it. In my 20s, I now understand it was very much a learnt behaviour. I learnt to look at the world in a certain way, and in my early 20s, I pretty much had a nervous breakdown. And I'm afraid I didn't quite learn my lesson in my early 20s. I carried on distracting myself, really. I was looking in all the wrong places. So I had a drug and alcohol problem, quite a strong drug and alcohol problem in my 20s. And it was only when I had a sort of spiritual awakening in my late 20s that I started to really put myself back together.
And when you say you had a spiritual awakening, what form did that take?
It's an interesting story. My mother was suffering with very bad chronic depression, and I'd watched her go downhill. This beautiful, wonderful woman, very capable woman, was now incapable of even boiling an egg. It got that bad. And I remember one day getting a phone call at work from my father, and he said, "Your mum has gone missing." I said, "What do you mean she's gone missing?" And essentially, she was supposed to be going to visit a friend locally, and she was walking there. And it's only like a 20-minute walk from our house, but she'd vanished. And so, I knew something was seriously wrong, and but decided to go obviously straight down to my parents' house. My boyfriend at the time was a paramedic. No coincidences there. He was on his day off, which was very handy. And picked up my sister on the way down. And when we got to my parents' house, there was a policeman in the living room, and the policeman was clutching a suicide note. And he said to me and my father, "Has your mum ever tried to do anything like this before?" I said no, and my dad said yes. And at that point, I discovered that my mum had very, very bad postnatal depression with my sister and with me, and been in and out of hospital, and actually tried to commit suicide once before. But this was news to me. I'd never been told this. It was like my kind of whole paradigm in the sense of what I thought to be my life shattered. And then I'd been suffering myself at that point for about 8 years with chronic depression. And of course, nobody in our family talked about it. So the next thing that happened was, obviously we went to look for my mum, and we have a large expanse of woods at the back of where my parents live. And I remember being with my sister and my boyfriend, and we got to this certain point, and you can turn left and you can turn right, and there's woods either direction. And it was quite critical. And I remember my sister saying, "Well, where do we go? Where do we look?" And at that point, I literally got a voice in my head, and the voice in my head said, "Turn right." I said, "Let's turn right." And my sister said, "How do you know to turn right?" And I said, "I'm just being told to turn right." And I had such an overwhelming voice and feeling that I needed to turn right. And the voice guided me and my sister and my boyfriend to where my mum had overdosed.
Wow.
And she had taken an overdose by the side of a river. And luckily for us, she had kind of slumped on top of herself, and she hadn't fallen into the water, because obviously that would have been really, she would have died. Dan did the sternum rub. I remember running for an ambulance, and I was, at that point in my life, I was living very hedonistically. I was overweight, I was smoking, I was drinking, I was doing drugs. And I remember running for this ambulance and kind of, as you do, having a conversation with whoever it is up there guiding us, who I'd never spoken to before. But I pretty much said, if you just get me out of this situation, I know I'm not living my life the way I'm supposed to be. I will make a change, I'll make a difference, but just please help my mum. luckily for us, she was okay. She came round. She was in hospital for a week or so, and then she got given help, counselling, CBT. But the experience of the voice in my head, really woke me up. And I wanted to understand, how could I get a voice in my head, and so it sent me down a personal development and spiritual rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I started to do everything I possibly could around personal development and spiritual development, and started to sort of slowly but surely transform my life.
Yeah, amazing. It's really interesting, isn't it, how so many people have got this kind of this crisis point from which everything changes, and you really know that you have to live your life differently. And you've absolutely lived differently. You've had an incredible you've had some incredible success, haven't you, in both in business and in the spiritual development stuff that you do. Tell us what you mean when you talk about doing your dharma. For anyone who's not aware of the word, spelled DHARMA, what does that really mean, and how do you sort of encourage people to do their dharma?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. The concept of dharma is only relatively new to me, in the sense that I've discovered it about 2 years ago, and it was like understanding the matrix for me. Mm-hmm. When I looked at my life through a dharmic lens, I was like, everybody needs to know and understand this stuff. I just saw my life in good and bad, and how I'd made the decisions, and how I was in or out of alignment with this force of life called dharma. So let me give you a kind of basic understanding of what it means, so people who haven't heard of it get to grips with it. The word dharma is used in about 18 different Indian languages, but the term I refer to is from the Vedic texts, and essentially what they talk about is it's the right path of action for the individual and the planet. And the Vedas are like the Indian equivalent of the Bible, would be the simplest way to describe them. They're very ancient texts, ancient wisdom that was passed down between kings and queens, and really kept for the upper echelons of society. But what they talk about is how everybody has a purpose, and how our job in this lifetime is to discover and uncover what that purpose is. And actually, the way we do that is by going towards the things that we're passionate about.
Yeah.
We all have unique gifts. We all have unique gifts and talents, and we all have things that we are truly passionate about. And those passions are not random. They're like a breadcrumb trail to your perfect life. Now, when I look back at my life through this dharmic lens, I could see how when I was suffering with very bad depression, I was always looking at what wasn't going right with my life. And I was always looking at what was wrong with myself. And I was always comparing myself to other people. And I always thought my life should look a certain way when it didn't. And consequently, I made myself very, very unhappy. And that's how we get out of the flow of alignment with dharma. That's the classic thing that we do, is that we compare ourselves, or we think life should look a certain way.
Yeah.
And then, sorry.
No, I carry on, please. Carry on.
I was just going to say that, what I started to do then was I started to go after the things that I was truly passionate about. Once I kind of woke myself up, and once I kind of understood that actually, the things that we love are made for us, So the nonprofit that I now run was totally the consequence of me following my breadcrumbs. I came up with this idea that I wanted to start a non-profit organization, like an American organization that was already in existence. And rather than talking myself out of it, saying it's not possible, who am I to do that, I really went for it. And this is testament, what I teach is that our dreams aren't random, they're made for us. But actually, societal conditioning will get in the way and say, you can't do that. You can't become an artist. You can't become a singer. And I love your story, Janey, because obviously you have been non-conventional all the way through your career, and you've proved it works. But that's not generally everybody's experience in life. We can get caught up in this. Society tells us, go and get a good job, go to school, get a good education. And then we wake up in our 40s and go, oh my God, I'm so unfulfilled.
Sure.
And where did my life go?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, what I really love about this is, particularly with the work that I'm doing now, I'm finding it so interesting that I hear so many stories of people who say, once I stopped drinking, suddenly there was this time in front of me. I had this spare time, because however much you're drinking takes up so much of your life. Thinking about it, planning when you're going to have the next one, when you're going to buy some more, how you're going to get home because you can't drive because you're drinking. It just goes on and on and on. It's all consuming. And people often, very, very often, and I feel immensely blessed that it didn't happen to me, but it probably would have done if I'd carried on much longer. But we stop short of achieving our dreams or going after them. And suddenly, when you do stop drinking, I've read lots of posts from people on various groups where they say, I'm feeling really restless. I'm doing okay. I'm however many days in, or I'm 6 months sober, or whatever it might be. But I feel really restless, and I don't know what to do of an evening anymore. And I know there's something out there for me, and I just don't quite know how to find it, which is actually a very exciting place to be, isn't it? So if someone's at that stage, where do they start then? If someone's maybe come through, I don't know, the abyss, if you like, they've probably had many years of pouring wine on their head, as I often say, and suddenly there's a bit of light appearing at the end of the tunnel, and they know that there's something that they're meant to do. Where would they start?
Well, I love this conversation, because I'm so with you. I think we use alcohol as a distraction.
Yeah.
And we generally use alcohol because, you've had a shitty day and something hasn't gone right, and maybe you open a bottle of wine, know, and what ends up happening is that distraction takes over huge parts of your life. And it's filling a hole for something that's, truly, truly satisfying, that you can create in your life. And so what I teach people to do is through my dharma course, it's very much a process of uncovering and discovering yourself. But I truly believe, we all came here in this lifetime to grow and to become the highest and best version of ourselves. And so generally speaking, we haven't been taught to look at who we are and what we are truly passionate about and what we are truly gifted in. So the first part of the process is to go back to basics. And, it's as simple as, what makes you feel good? Again, I truly believe we all have an inner sat nav. Joy is to be followed. Excitement is to be followed. That's your sat nav. And now that may sound contrary and simple, but actually what you find when you're doing something you truly love, that excites you, that you're passionate about, you can do it and do it and do it, and it doesn't feel like work. So of course you're going to be more successful in that thing, because actually it's a natural extension of who you are. And when you couple that in with your natural talents, bingo, it's like the sort of the center point between your passions and your natural talents. It's almost like the element.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so true. And I think a lot of people too, once they give up the booze, find that actually their job doesn't suit them anymore, or their career path just doesn't suit them. And suddenly they start to realize, hold on, I've really got to be brave now and face this, rather than staying on the treadmill. I've got to face this. So, while we're not necessarily suggesting that everybody immediately gives up their job or gives up their relationship, because of course that's the other thing that can often change. Relationships can very much shift and slide. There is often a time when people think, actually, I've been on this same path and it's time to make a change. And you feel so much more brave. And, if you can kind of grab hold of it, if you like. I mean, let me just ask you one other question on this. It's quite interesting, because when we talk about, I don't know, life purpose and what we're here to do, I'm always conscious that there are people that may be thinking, oh, well, that's all right for you, you're kind of creative type, but I'm not creative, and so therefore I don't have a life purpose. But I'm sure you will agree that I've since realized that a life purpose doesn't have to mean that you create something or you start a business or you write a book. It doesn't have to mean that. Of course, with lots of people, often there is a creative element, but it doesn't have to be that. Your life purpose might just be, I don't know, to be happy, or maybe to make someone else happy. Am I right?
Yeah, I think there's a real misnomer around the life purpose conversation. People self-deem themselves a failure because they don't know why they're here, and it doesn't work like that. The way I look at purpose is essentially your life purpose will unveil itself to you when you get on the right path, and it will also shift and change as you evolve. So it's not like you're here to do one thing. You're always being prepared for whatever it is you're supposed to do in life. It's whether you choose to kind of look at the signs and signals. And as you evolve and go through life, your purpose and your mission in life will also evolve and change. So,
Yeah.
you know, I always talk about mums, you know, of course, your children are part of your purpose, you know, but as they grow, as you grow, then you're evolving and they're evolving. You get more space back into your life. That's when you need to start looking at what it is that fulfills you and potentially go back into your life mission and your purpose and your passions. So I think we have to be really careful, because I think a lot of people just think, if I don't, you know, I don't know now what I'm supposed to do in my life. And actually what I do is I teach people how to get onto the correct path.
Yeah.
You know, your feelings are a barometer. So if you're sitting in that job and you feel restless and you hate going to bloody work every day, you don't want to get out of bed, that is telling you something. But what tends to happen is we get stuck in the fear of paying our bills, fear of not being enough, and so we don't move. Now what will happen is, you hear about this all the time, and people say, oh my God, I got made redundant, and at the time it's the worst thing that ever happened to me. But give them a 6 months, give them a year, they say it's the best thing that ever happened to them. Because I believe the universe will move you if you're not listening to the signs and signals. So if you ignore those signs and signals for long enough, the universe goes, you're going the wrong way. Right, we're going to make you redundant, so you have to start your business.
Yeah.
You know, and so what I teach people is how to get back in tune with themselves, start to understand their sat nav, and then basically start to get their life in flow so that synchronicity becomes a norm.
Yeah. Now, there'll be a lot of people listening who've had real issues or are still having real issues with depression, with anxiety. You know, there's so much of this, and of course we, again, on this podcast, I love talking about this topic because I think it's great to bring it out in the open. And there's no doubt that there's a massive link between being alcohol dependent, between drinking too much and mental health. There's a huge link, but I'm where I don't want to kind of say, well, stop drinking and all your mental health issues are resolved, because it really doesn't work that way. But one thing's for sure, it certainly won't be helping your mental health to be drinking too much. So I'd be really interested in your, I mean, it's a massive question, so I'm not expecting you to answer it all in one sentence, but having been through that with your family, that kind of whole issue of mental health, what would you say to someone who is perhaps only just recognizing that what they've got going on is perhaps a deep-rooted anxiety or mental health issue, and again, they don't really know where to start to come out of that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say you're not alone.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been there, and it is truly horrible. So I completely relate. You know, I remember having times where I used to float outside of my body. I was having a conversation with somebody, but I was so detached from the person that I was. I literally could see myself in the conversation, but I was, you know, not in my own body. So, you know, please know that I've been there. And so what I say is coming from experience, in a sense. Like, I incrementally chipped away at my life. And what I mean by that is anxiety and depression are very low level emotional vibrational states. Now, I truly believe everything is energy. And when you're anxious and depressed, generally speaking, what you're probably focusing on is everything that is going wrong with your life and everything that's wrong with you and everything, you know, you're just in a bad place. So, you know, simple things that you can do, you know, something that is so simple, but it's so powerful, is a daily gratitude practice. Like, I literally had to shift my life and shift my circle. So I started doing daily gratitude practice about what it was that I was grateful for. Now, gratitude is the opposite end of the emotional vibrational scale. It's a very high level emotion. Passion, joy, gratitude are the opposite levels. They're very high level emotional states. So if you can implement a gratitude process into your lifestyle on a daily basis, twice a day, I do it now. Whenever I feel low or I get, you know, fixated on something that's not going right, I'm like, my goodness, look. And what tends to happen is, once you start to shift your focus and once you start to look at all the things that are going right, you literally shift your emotion and your vibration, and things do start to get better.
Yeah.
But this is
do you write it down, or do you just try to remember the things you're grateful for?
I have a piece of paper, a notepad by my bed, and I literally, that's my first thing I do when I wake up. Is I usually, the first thing I write is, I'm just really pleased to be in this lovely warm bed, and even that just brings such a lovely kind of smile to my face.
Yeah.
And it won't happen overnight. Like, if you are chronically depressed, you have to chip away at this. So if you imagine you have a set point. So you have a set point where naturally your emotions sit. And so by practicing gratitude twice a day or whenever you're feeling down, it literally will move your set point up. And then the other thing that's really important is community. Like for me, I have had a real history of binge drinking. I used to work in the city, cocaine and binge drinking were rife. And when I was upset, rather than expressing my emotions, I just went and did a binge.
Yeah.
And so who you surround yourself with, what's your home environment like? What's your work environment like? Who are your friends? Because all of those things will I suppose, add up. And you need to look at who you're surrounding yourselves with. If you're, trying to stop drinking and you don't want to be a drinker anymore, go and make friends outside of your people that you know from the pub, outside of the people that you know have known all your life, because it's very difficult to stop doing something if everybody around you is doing it. We're human.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the concept of gratitude. It's something we've spoken about on the podcast a lot. And I know I interviewed Dr. David Hamilton, who I'm sure you're aware of.
Oh, yes,
And
lovely.
yeah, he's a lovely guy. And he says, he talks about obviously the fact that kindness is good for you. And, we know that as the person giving the kindness, you benefit potentially even more than the person receiving it. And one thing I think is interesting is as you say, gratitude kind of override, it's a higher level vibration, if you like, and it overrides that kind of low vibration state. And I also think that there can be times when you're feeling very sorry for yourself or very depressed or anxious or whatever that state might be, that it feels too much to even practice self-care. It feels too hard to actually go and do something for yourself. In fact, you end up feeling guilty about doing that. So a way to turn it on its head, instead of even trying to do something for yourself at that point, would be just go and do something for somebody else. I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Paying it forward is such an amazing thing. But if you're in that place where you are, you can't do anything, I think depression is all about looking at the past, and being anxious and having anxiety is generally being worried about the future. When we come back to the now, that's powerful. And so again, you've got to retrain your brain, because most of the time we're in fight or flight. And if we're anxious and we're depressed, we are literally, we're not even in the present moment. That's what I found when I was chronically depressed, is I was so worried about what was happening in the future or what people were thinking of me. I wasn't in the present moment. So very simple breathing exercise is really good to bring you back into the moment. I'm sure you've heard of it, Janey, but it's like pranayama breathing.
Just talk us through it again.
Yeah, well, it balances the hemispheres of the brain. So when you're anxious and depressed, you're in fight or flight, your brain is kind of all over the place. So the pranayama breathing is literally, you close one nostril and you breathe up the opposite nostril. There we go. And then you close that nostril and then breathe down the one that you had closed. And then you go back up that nostril and then swap and then down the opposite nostril. So you do that for about 5 minutes. And it's so simple. But if you're having an anxiety attack or you're feeling depressed, what that will do is balance both hemispheres of the brain. So you come back into the here and now. And that's powerful, because actually, in the here and now, the famous book is Eckhart Tolle, isn't it? His book is all about the power of now and being in the moment. And there's nothing actually wrong when we focus on being in the now. But generally speaking, if we're anxious and depressed, we're either in the future or in the past. Yeah. So that will really help people balance themselves back out.
Sure. And you mentioned your boozy background, working in the corporate world. Where are you at now then in the alcohol department? Do you mind me asking?
No, not at all. So my husband and I quit at Christmas.
Oh, wow.
For good. Yeah. So my journey with it has been, I quit when I was in my early 30s, and I was shifting myself out of a very toxic environment, and I quit for about a year. And then I stupidly went back into it. And actually it was fine, I think, for quite a while. And then actually I met my husband, and my husband likes to have a drink as well. And so we were dating and courting, and it was quite booze fueled.
Yeah.
As in, like you were, you go out for lunch or something. And then when we started to live together, we said, no, we're going to stop drinking again. So we stopped drinking for quite a while. And then we got to the stage where we thought, we'll just social, we'll just have one or two. And I've finally learnt my lesson, third time round, is that actually I'm not very good at moderation. And what tends to happen is it tends to just creep up. So you start off at weekends, and then the next thing you know, you might be opening a bottle on the Thursday. And we're at a point in our lives now with my partner is very into meditation and his spiritual practice. And my work is taking me to a new level. And like you said, the time aspect, I've got to a point now where I haven't even missed it. And this is it. This is it for us basically now. So yeah,
it's interesting that you say you managed a whole year and then went back. What do you think is different this time? If you think back to the end of that year, that year that you gave up when you decided to start again, was it that feeling that I think so many people get, that kind of thing of, oh, well, I've done a year, I've got this, I can have one. Was it kind of that feeling? And why do you feel sure that this is different? Because I think this is going to be a big one for a lot of people listening to this.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think I've just learned about myself more. So the second time we stopped and we started again, I think we thought as a couple we could socially just drink. And we proved to ourselves we can't. We're not very good at it. It just creeps up. And so I think I finally learnt my lesson. But actually,
finally know that you don't have an off switch like me. I'm born without an off switch.
I think you just start to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
As well. And I think
that's true. I mean, what's really been an eye opener for me is the fact that I don't think I actually realised how addictive alcohol was. I don't know how that bit of information kind of passed me by, but I sure as heck know it now.
Yeah. And I think it also starts to shift, doesn't it? And you see it for what it is. Like, it's just not good for us. We're brought up in an environment where we start drinking so young, we don't know how to socialize without it. And actually, you can have so much fun without alcohol. Like, I love to go out with people drinking because it can be quite good fun, but I always leave before it gets a bit messy and actually wake up the next day with no hangover, and you're really pleased about it. It's just, we've been so conditioned to socialize with alcohol. Everybody's refinding their feet to understand how to socialize without it. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, it's lovely to talk to you because I get the sense as well that to hear your story, that how do I phrase this? It's almost like when you are on that spiritual path, when you've kind of got your head around the fact that you want to, do your dharma, as you would say, you really do want to live within that life purpose. I know you use the expression following your bliss as well, which is lovely. And when you make that decision and you want to live at that vibration, alcohol really doesn't seem to fit. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's only recently that I've felt that way. In the last kind of year and a half, I used to be, partying with plenty of enlightened people, but I now really feel, actually, if you really do want to live on a slightly higher vibration, you can't be pouring the booze on your head.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's totally counterproductive, because actually, especially with me, I'm very driven by my mission. And for me now, it's about growing a bigger tribe. We've got listeners in 65 countries, and we've got just had about 50 people do our highest excitement challenge. But I'm so driven by my mission to basically reform society's views on how we can live, that takes precedence to the alcohol. And you're totally right. It's a vibrational thing. If we want to keep ourselves in a high level of emotional vibration, drinking alcohol does the opposite of that. And so it just doesn't mix.
It's great to talk to you, Kitty, and I think the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing. So tell us where people can find out more about your course.
Thank you. Well, I have a Do Your Dharma course, as you mentioned, 8-week online course, beautiful tribe of people. And I think, as we discussed in the podcast, if you're trying to create the life of your dreams, I call it creating a life in alignment with your soul. It's very difficult to do that by yourself. So we have a lovely community of people who have gone through that. And the website on that is doyourdharma.co.uk. And then, like you, I have a podcast, Kitty Talks, where I interview people like yourself who are doing their dharma and making a difference on the planet.
Excellent. Kitty, thank you so much for your time. You've been such an inspirational guest. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. So lovely to talk to you and your audience.
So check out Kitty's Do Your Dharma course and the Kitty Talks podcast. I love the fact that Kitty talks about purpose, and it is something I come up with, against a lot with clients I work with, and I'm working with people to help them get their message out to a wider audience. I so often find that with small business owners or with experts, they can be undecided as to which aspect of their work they should focus on at any one time. And sometimes they just don't quite feel the confidence to be visible in their own brand. And sometimes within the conversation, we uncover something else going on, something else that they actually have a deeper calling for, something different that they really want to do, but it's fear holding them back. And I heard best-selling author and podcaster and coach Lewis Howes speak recently about this concept of taking off the mask, because we all have them, don't we? These masks that we choose to wear. And he had this really, I thought, important phrase, and he said, go where the fear is. So, recognize what is it that you're afraid of and follow that, which of course is a very scary thing to do. So that's my self-care tip this week. It's a slightly different one, but I'm going to challenge you to look inside and ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Where is my fear, particularly around something that I'm meant to do? And then just do one small thing towards facing it. I mean, uncovering what it is might be enough. I would love to hear your suggestions, big or small, for self-care, whatever that might mean for you. We are still doing our campaign, if you like, Stay Dry till July. So use that hashtag, particularly if you're messaging or if you're putting a post on Twitter or on Facebook. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram if you haven't already. It's at Janey Lee Grace. And don't forget you can email me, janey@janeyleegrace.com. And all the holistic living recommendations are over at imperfectlynatural.com, where we still have those competitions, by the way, to win alcohol-free drinks and to win some kombucha. And one more time, maybe not one more time, I might tell you more than once. But anyway, don't forget our event, because it's a free meetup in London at the Jago in Dalston. It's a funky community venue. There's nothing flash about it. It's very informal. Monday, 29th of April at 7 p.m. It's free to come. It's all organised by the charity My Yard. And they're a tiny, tiny, tiny little charity. But we just really want to be able to reach as many people as we can with these events, because why not come and meet other people who are sober curious. It's called Self-Care for the Sober Curious. And our guest next time is Laura Willoughby from Club Soda, incredibly knowledgeable and very experienced in all things sobriety. So we will have an extended Q&A with Laura. Check out the Eventbrite link, because you do need to book your tickets, even though they're free. So just go on to Eventbrite and type in Self-Care for the Sober Curious, or if you type in My Yard, then it will come up. We'll have some alcohol-free drinks on the night. We're hopefully going to have some new kombucha to try and some vegan nibbles. So it would be just great to see you there. Don't miss out on the tickets. See if you can get yourself that train to London, or however you can get to us. And still carrying on these themes, if you like, of self-care and self-love and kindness. Coming up in the next few weeks, I've got an interview with Harriet Whaley-Cohen, an interview with Scott, the boy who drank too much, and I'm scheduling an interview with William Porter. I know that his book has been hugely helpful to many people in the kind of sober, curious community. And don't forget, if you have comments, feedback, questions, send them through. I may not have the answer personally, of course, but I will make sure that I can find someone who does. And do email me or send me a DM. Very happy to add your email to our list. We've got a little PDF of resources that we sent out to people who came to the event, so you'd be very welcome to that. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Free Life podcast with Janey Lee Grace. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, rate us, share on social media, and tune in again.